Chip, Tam, and football. That's what Pittsburgh does. What's up, everybody? Brian Batko here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, one of our Steelers beat writers, and bringing you our Tuesday guest-driven show. As always, this week, we're going to be joined by Brian Costello from the New York Post. Take a little bit of different angle on the Aaron Rodgers stuff, get his perspective on Justin Fields, ending up with the Jets, which is the team he covers up there in the Big Apple. So it should be a fun conversation with Brian Costello about all the sort of Steelers Jets connections marinating here from 2024 into 2025. First, though, we are brought to you by Pella. No better place to get new windows and doors installed in your home than Pella, who can help you save on energy costs year round. Schedule a free in-home consultation with your local Pella Windows and Doors to find the right product for your home and your budget. Give them a call at 866-593-1560 to discuss your project further. That's 866-593-1560 to get started on planning your new windows and doors installation with Pella Windows and Doors of Pittsburgh. All right, when we're back on the other side, we will be joined by Brian Costello, New York Jets beat writer of the New York Post. See you then. All right, there's our guest for this week, Brian Costello from the New York Post, Jets beat writer for a while now. How's it going, man?
I'm good. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing all right. Obviously, the Jets and the Steelers are changing a lot of paint these days, or potentially could be here as we near the end of March. So I wanted to have you on, get a little different perspective on all that's going on. So first, I think the biggest question that everybody here has about Aaron Rodgers is, how does he specifically treat middle-aged dad print media beat writers named Brian?
Well, that part is good. That part was good.
Okay,
He's
nice. That's great for me to hear.
You know, it's funny because obviously he elicits a lot of response from people, and not just your typical football fans, right? Like there's people that know him from McAfee and
Enigma now.
Enigma, to watch Enigma, and it hurts. So there's just like, so sometimes it's funny because I liked him. I like dealing with Aaron a lot. I thought he was really good for us. He gave us stories every single week, and he gives thoughtful answers. He kind of understands the job. You can talk to him at his locker. So there would be sometimes I could sense people like didn't like his politics and that were like friends of mine, and I'd be like, well, I like him. He's a nice guy, but he's very good to deal with.
All right. So kind of on that note, as we've been sitting here in Pittsburgh, kind of agonizing over the Rodgers waiting game for the last, I guess, going on two weeks now, Brian. I mean, I've started to think of like, okay, there's a lot of these general broad Rodgers perceptions that are out there, and I'm probably as guilty of repeating them as anybody. So I'm like, all right, how about I get on somebody who's been with him for the last couple years, been around him every day, and let's kind of vet these to some extent. So I guess the first one I'll say is sort of what you alluded to there, the Rodgers drama, distraction, sideshow, whatever you want to call it, that comes with it. I mean, how big of a problem was that the last couple of seasons, or is it more so every now and again there's a big headline based on something he says on McAfee show or whatever, and it gets kind of blown out of proportion?
I think it's not so bad for the team, right? Like I don't think the players really cared a lot. Some of them would roll their eyes at some of the stuff that happened, but it's a lot for the coach. Now, Tomlin is a much different spot than Robert Saleh was dealing with it, right? Tomlin has the pelt on the wall and can kind of, what he says is sort of accepted. Like the biggest one to me that like kind of created a stir was when he skipped the mandatory minicamp to go to Egypt.
Yeah, I feel like you almost got to compartmentalize like the Rodgers kind of zany quotes versus, okay, that's a time that he's actually not around the team, and it caused a little bit of a crap storm, I guess.
Yeah, that was, and Saleh got criticized for how he handled it. And people are like, oh, he shouldn't have made a big deal about it. But it's like, if you don't make a big deal about it, then what kind of message are you sending to the rest of the guys? So that one created a storm. But like, last year at this time, it came out that he was a potential vice presidential candidate for RFK Jr., right? But that was like, it was in the middle of March. It caused problems for the beat writers and like people covering the team, but really there was nothing going on. So like the people inside the Jets were kind of just like laughing about it, that sort of thing. And then like he got into a war with Jimmy Kimmel at the end of his first year, but again, it didn't really affect anything with the team. Though that the Egypt one, I felt like that one sort of penetrated the walls of the building, and they felt it because he wasn't there, and 31 other quarterbacks were with their teams, and he wasn't. And he had given a big speech at the end of the 2023 season about eliminating the BS inside the Jets organization, and how they had to just be about football and just about winning. And then he picked the 1 week that was mandatory between January and July to take his vacation. He picked. So, but the rest of it, he's pretty good during the season. I've noticed of not going down too many roads with McAfee. He did it more like in the off season. There was stuff that he would say, and January, February. I'm sure he's going to make an appearance. I've told people, I think whenever he picks his team, I don't think it's going to be broken by a reporter or an insider or anything. I think he's going to announce it on Pat McAfee at 1:00 in the afternoon one day, because that's how he likes to do it.
Or Brian, I mean, we know this because we are deeply embedded in all of this right now, but I guess there's going to be a live event in Pittsburgh. I think it's early next month. So maybe Google that date.
Oh, with McAfee?
Yes. So,
okay. That's a good one. Yeah.
That's come down from the Raptors like Sting.
The wait was long when he came to the Jets, because there was like this initial burst of like January. It started to percolate like that he might be on the market. And then he went on the darkness retreat. And I remember the combine was like, is he or isn't he? And the Jets were meeting with Derek Carr. And then he went on McAfee like mid-March and said he was coming to the Jets. But then it took another like 6 weeks before the teams agreed to a trade. Like the trade didn't really happen until a couple days before the draft. So you might be in for a longer wait than you expect.
Yeah. Well, that is kind of the crazy thing about it too, is, that was technically a trade, even if, we kind of know he was steering the ship a little bit, but this is the first time he's ever been a proper free agent. So that adds a whole other layer. Going back to the missing minicamp thing last year, just real quick, like, not to belabor it, but what exactly was the situation? Because I've tried to go back and read. It was an unexcused absence by the team, but also did Saleh kind of try to thread the needle and say he knew about it? And
yeah, so Rodgers told them early in spring. I don't know when exactly, but they knew he was going to miss that minicamp.
But they're still kind of like, we can't just excuse you from the only mandatory week.
Like, so here's what's going on for Steelers fans who weren't paying attention to the Jets last year. The Jets traded for Hassan Reddick from the Eagles at the end of March. Reddick never shows up. Okay, wants a new contract. So he skipped all of spring, including mandatory minicamp. So the Jets fined him for missing mandatory minicamp. So in their minds, it's like, we can't fine Hassan Reddick for missing minicamp and not fine Aaron Rodgers for missing minicamp. Like, the Jets took a lot of bullets for basically like Rodgers running the team, because they brought in Alan Lazard, they brought in Nathaniel Hackett, they ended up with Davante Adams eventually. There was always a joke that like Joe Douglas was the assistant GM and Rodgers was the GM. So they were kind of sensitive to that. So I think they felt too, if we just say, hey, go ahead, go to Egypt during minicamp, who cares? It was going to be a bad precedent. And I agree with them. Now, some people argued they should have come out and told everyone like 2 weeks before if they knew it, and sort of just. But to me, I'm like, that's just extending the news cycle.
Yeah.
Like they did this with minicamp. Like after minicamp, we didn't see them for 6 weeks. So they had to answer questions about it for 2 days. If they had done it 2 weeks before, I think they would have created a situation where they were answering questions for 3 weeks. But yeah, it was. They knew, but yeah, they were trying. I think they tried to talk him out of it. The way he explained it was like he had a lot of people going with him that couldn't change the plans. I think he tried to change the plans, but they just couldn't pull it off. The cost, not to Rodgers, who obviously has plenty of money, but to the people that were going with him, I think it would have cost too much.
Okay, the other Rodgers off the field trope that I'll ask you about, and I'm kind of more curious about these because any Steelers fan, if they really want to, can go back and watch Jets highlights from the end of last season and come to their own conclusions about whether they think he can still sling it or still move or whatever. The stuff about, calling out teammates or throwing guys under the bus, I think it got magnified here in Pittsburgh because the Steelers are the team that ended up with Mike Williams. Was that whole thing more of a one-off, or was there actual like friction, tension? Because we always did here in Green Bay too, even though he was well liked, it seems, by teammates. Very high standard, kind of a tough guy to please, and probably goes hand in hand with keeping around Lazard, Cobb, those guys for as long as he did.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Mike Williams one was the most high profile one. That was the one like publicly he called out a teammate. The other ones are all kind of like if you do watch, I like he after every incomplete pass or everything, he kind of does he has some kind of motion or he's yelling at the ref about a penalty. Like I think that stuff wears on guys, and like it's interesting because there's a question like, is he a good teammate? And you'll see like Jets players like put on Twitter, like, oh, oh no, we're Miss Aaron. He was liked in the locker room. And like he sits in the locker room and he holds court and he hangs with the guys. Like I covered Brett Favre a little bit when he was here that year. I did like half that year. Favre was distant. Favre was like he had his own, like they called it was like an office. It was like a room off of the trainer's room. Or he would never come in the locker room. So he was like kind of, you knew he was there for a year and he was going to. Rodgers like really immersed himself in the team and tried. And so guys liked him, especially the defensive players liked him because they didn't have to deal with the frustration of playing with him. Like the frustration came with playing with him. Like he changes plays a lot. The Jets had a million ineligible man down the field penalties because he would switch from run to pass. And, maybe it didn't get to the lineman that he was switching. And so that kind of built frustration. But yeah, he and Garrett Wilson did not get along. There was just friction from that between them. So I'd be curious to see how it goes with George Pickens, from what I've seen from him from afar.
And DK Metcalf now too here.
Metcalf. Yeah, he can be frustrating to play with because he does have high standards, and Aaron thinks he's better at his job than you are at your job. And that basically applies to every single person there is. All right. And that's what creates friction with like coaching. And I think
he probably
Tomlin
is to be better, fair compared to me, but yeah.
Like Tomlin might fare better because Tomlin, like I said, he has a track record. But like Rodgers definitely thought he knew more than Saleh and the Jets coaches.
Well, yeah, that'd be a fascinating dynamic. Granted, Tomlin did kind of live that life with Ben Roethlisberger for a long time. And he was like the 1 year I was in there with him, or a couple years, I guess, he was kind of in between that Brett Favre 1 and 52 other guys and versus, Rodgers really trying to cozy up to.
He really tried, Rodgers, and he would even embrace like guys at the bottom of the roster. He did, and he would try. His first year, he was always he went to like Knicks games and he did a lot of different stuff with guys and was.
I was surprised when Brandon Echols did his introductory press conference here at the Steelers. Like he had a little Rodgers anecdote about some inside joke that they had, and that's a backup DB type of guy. So. No, I bet like there's a lot of guys that just come through for a week or two, but like anyone who was with the Jets the 2 years, and even if you're the bottom of the roster, he had an interaction with you. There was a guy. They called up a guy from the practice squad, Jarius Monroe, a safety out of Tulane, an undrafted guy. They called him up in like week 16. They signed him. And Rodgers in his press conference just said, hey, I just want to say something. And he like praised Monroe for his work with the scout team all year and how happy he was. And I went to Monroe like the next day to try to get something, a note. And Rodgers walked over and put his arm around him and was like, I'm glad you're talking to this guy. Like he's really worked his butt off. And it's just like, a guy of that level acknowledging, someone who's the 53rd man on the roster, basically just got signed on the practice squad, showed like he's not a bad teammate in that regard. It's it's kind of weird because he's one of the best players to ever play. It's on Sundays where the problems kind of crop up. Yeah, well, I know he was known for having a million hand signals with the Packers, and if you couldn't get on the same page there, dicey how much you play. So, a lot of moving parts there. Anything else you want to add on Rodgers before we switch topics here, Brian?
No, like I think I would just say, like, Steelers.
Do you think he can still play? I mean, physically, you were watching every snap. Yeah.
Look, he has moments. It's just not what it was. And like, there's games where I almost say like there's halves where you're like, wow, it looks pretty good. The biggest knock I have on him from last year with the Jets is there was a stretch of games where the Jets season was still in play in like late September, October, where they were in games. And you kind of said to yourself, well, this is why they got Aaron Rodgers, right? This is what Aaron Rodgers can do that Zach Wilson couldn't do, is win the game in the fourth quarter. And he didn't win the game. And, he threw a couple interceptions at the end of these games. Some of them weren't his fault. There was a missed kick here or there. But, like, even the game in Pittsburgh, he throws the interception before halftime, and that just completely changed that game. And he played a pretty good first half and not a good second half in Pittsburgh. It was almost always a half. And I've heard this thing about, like, the end of the year he played well. Yeah, against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he played well. Against Miami Dolphins, zombie team that knew they weren't going to the playoffs, he played pretty well. Watch the Buffalo Bills in week 17. It did not go well. And that was a team that was a good team playing in Buffalo. So, there's something he can still play. I just don't think he can. It's as consistent as it used to be, or as high level as it used to be.
All right. I don't think we'll spend quite as much time on Brandon Echols, but what are the Steelers getting out of the versatile, outside, inside corner who's coming in here where I guess he's going to get a little better opportunity in the secondary?
Yeah. So Echols played a lot as a rookie. The Jets, he came in solid his first year. They just had really nothing. So he started as a rookie, played okay. He had a big interception of Tom Brady that year, I remember. He asked for Tom Brady to autograph the ball after the game, which got a lot of publicity.
The reverse Beanie Bishop, Aaron Rodgers thing that happened this past season between the Steelers and the Jets.
Yeah, I think it was a pick six, if I remember. Right. I'm not sure. He definitely asked for an autograph after. Then the next year, the Jets drafted Sauce Gardner, and they signed DJ Reed, and Echols' playing time dropped drastically. And that's the way it's kind of been the last 3 years. But when he's played, he finds the ball. It's crazy. Sauce Gardner doesn't have he had one interception that last year, and it had been in a drought for 2 years. He doesn't the ball does not go to him much. Echols always seemed to find the ball. So for a while last year, Echols had the only interception for the Jets. And he had, I think, 2 pick sixes on Tua 3 years. So he's I thought the Jets might bring him back because I knew they were going to lose DJ Reed in free agency. They weren't going to pay him. So I thought Echols might be a cheaper option to start for them. So I do think he could start. I think he's not, going to be top rated quarterback in the NFL, but I do think he could be a starter. And saving that, he's a very good backup. He's going to be, if you need to play him for a stretch of games, you're going to be fine with him at cornerback.
Yeah, if he starts here, it'll be on the inside with Joey Porter Jr. and Darius.
Yeah, so here
on the outside,
he played.
Unless there's an injury, of course, but
he played a little bit inside here. They have Michael Carter II, who's their nickel, who really played and was the same draft class as him.
Yeah.
So I knew he was the backup there at times. So I haven't seen him play a lot of nickel inside, but he's a good special teams player too.
That definitely helps. Well, all right. What's kind of Steelers Jets could potentially be like that one that trashy show my wife used to watch, Wife Swap, with Aaron Rodgers and Justin Fields. What are the vibes up there with Gang Green and company and how they are, I guess, reacting to? I haven't seen any introductory presser for Fields.
No, they're not doing anything with them. They're not doing any.
The Jets Steelers didn't last year either. So
Jets are trying to lay low on that regard. So they didn't have anything for anyone. Jets have felt like they were crowned the offseason champions too often in recent years, so they're trying to have a quiet offseason. But I think the sense I feel like there's a lot of rationalization going on with Jets fans. So it feels like Fields was the best of a lot of not so inspiring options at quarterback once they let Rodgers go. So he's a guy who has potential. He's younger. Obviously has the running ability. So I think Jets fans are optimistic about that part of it, while also kind of being realistic, hey, it hasn't really worked for this guy for 4 years now. The odds of him clicking with the Jets are slim. But hey, maybe he could be Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold and turn his career around. But I think it's just kind of cautious optimism right now. They're not jumping for joy with him.
Yeah, I mean I think I get the sense that a lot of Steelers fans actually wish they would have re-signed him so that they weren't in this, boiling pot of quarterback uncertainty. And, a lot of people around here, at least, I think Brian balked at the price, but, that's kind of the going rate, I guess, for a QB.
Yeah, it's not bad for a quarterback. It's less than the going rate for a quarterback. You look at it, it's quarterbacks are getting obviously $60 million a year. $20 million.
I guess I should say going rate for a middle class QB who hasn't really established himself, but kind of
26 years old.
A weird case. Yeah,
he's 26 years old, so I think you're taking a chance there. But yeah, it's. I mean, do you think what did you think of the way he played for Pittsburgh at the beginning of last year?
Almost hard to remember because it's been so long, but I thought he was kind of starting to put it together a little bit through those 6 games. Now his last game in Vegas against the Raiders had some of the yipsiest Justin Fields moments we had seen. So there was even some rumblings, I remember, in the press box up, 8 million feet high at Allegiant Stadium of whether they would bench him at half for Russell Wilson, who was in this kind of sort of healthy state for the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season. So I wasn't too shocked that Mike Tomlin turned the page, but I was mildly surprised because I thought they were finding ways to win. That's kind of the Steelers' MO. They want to be this run-first identity team. It's sure a lot easier to do that with a mobile quarterback. And the biggest thing to me was Arthur Smith really, really seemed to like him. And hasn't there been sort of some weird interplay between Arthur Smith and the Jets over these last couple years as well? So I wonder if some ideas were shared between the two organizations there.
I do think that because going way back, he interviewed in 21 and he was basically the runner-up to Saleh.
Right.
And he took the Atlanta job. It was basically, he was up for the Jets job. And then Saleh tried to bring him in as sort of like a senior advisor to the offense before last season, before he got hired by Pittsburgh. And then this year he interviewed for the job again. That when they hired Glenn. And someone with the Jets did say to me something about, not about Fields, but about Arthur Smith's feelings on another quarterback. So I was like, okay. So like this is they did probe a little bit with these guys, especially I think the offensive guys about quarterbacks and what they would do. So yeah, I do think they probably asked about Fields when they met with Arthur Smith, in January.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, just going back to when he was starting, I think a lot of us on the beat got the feeling that Smith was very pro. We're gonna progress with Justin, and like we're getting the best football out of him. We're developing him here the way that he wasn't in Chicago, and it's probably human nature for a lot of offensive coordinators and play callers, especially if they have a soft spot for the guy, personally too. So, I mean, Mike Tomlin basically admitted that he went lone wolf, turning the page from Fields to Russ, and then it was really good there for a little bit, and I think that spark kind of made it hard to ever go back, and it almost would have been unfair to Fields too, I think, to be like, hey, Russ is struggling, go beat the Ravens in a winner go home playoff game too, when you haven't played in a month.
It was funny because it was the Jets week when he made the change. So I remember Russ didn't play all that well in the first half.
Oh, it looked bad, and I had people texting me, I had friends and family texting me like, oh gosh, get this guy back to the sideline.
They were booing him and everything. I was like, uh-oh. And then all of a sudden he started throwing 50-50 balls up in the air, and it worked, and he led them to the win. So
we don't know where he's going to end up either. Sure doesn't seem like he's going to be back here. But very strange offseason for quarterbacks, and the Jets and Steelers were both embroiled in it for sure.
Yeah, well, and like in the other team in town here, the Giants are they're in the Rodgers waiting game as well. Doesn't feel like they're as serious a candidate.
No one calls it a sweepstakes, do they?
No. So, but he has a really nice house that's not that far from the Giants facility. So I give them that part of it. But the team, obviously the Steelers have a better roster. So I would think that's what he's more interested in right now.
Yeah. I mean, Rodgers has enough money to sell that house, build a nice new house somewhere else, or keep that house and use it for whatever else when you retire. Did you get the sense that he's got a few more years left in him, or do you think maybe one? Because obviously he wants to play one more year. I shouldn't say obvious with him. Nothing's obvious, but
nothing's obvious.
Seems like he wants to play one more year.
He always kept pushing that, like right when he got here. It's funny because like he first said, like when he was in that darkness retreat, that he was like 95% retired or whatever, 90% retired. And then he got here and we all kind of assumed it was for like a year. And then he was like, oh no, I think it'll be like 2 years. And then it was like, oh, maybe it'll be 3 years. And he kept kind of pushing it back. So I think as long as his body feels well, like the guy, he doesn't have kids. So it's not like he's got the pull of a wife and kids that want him home. He plays golf, but I don't think he does a lot of other things in terms of like that would pull him away from football. And I don't know what his post-playing career looks like. I think I saw a report a few weeks ago, like nobody really wants him to be an announcer because he's too polarizing. And, so I think he'll probably play as long as his body feels like it can. I mean, that's the other part with Rodgers I would just add is he's had injuries the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And, I'd be worried about that signing him at 41. Like he hurt his thumb the last year in Green Bay. That affected his play. Obviously tore the Achilles the first year here. Last year he had hamstring, ankle, knee problems that kind of everyone was like, oh, that's why he didn't play well, So, and he's a prideful guy that's not going to come out if he just has these injuries. And I think looking back, the Jets probably would have been better off benching him in October for a few weeks to get him healthy and playing Tyrod Taylor, but they didn't do it.
Yeah, I also can't, because like some people are still wondering, hey, well, the Steelers also draft a QB in like the 3rd or 4th round too, and I'm like, you could, but I almost think you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound when you bring in Aaron Rodgers. You're not really going to bench him if he's not playing well, even on a 1-year deal, because it just doesn't seem like a guy that you do that to. But hey, I guess
I do think he'll be
paid the big bucks.
I do think he'd embrace the mentor role for a young quarterback.
Maybe I'm wrong on that.
I think
then.
He did it with Jordan Love. Everyone like Jordan Love. Everyone says he was great with Jordan Love, and he has scars from Brett Favre, how Brett Favre treated him, and I don't think he'll ever do that again. And I also think Aaron is smart enough to realize where he is in his career, that like this is the end, and he would, because we asked him like, what if the Jets kept you, like what if they draft a quarterback, and he was like, yeah, I'll be fine with it. He's like, I'll do everything in my power to make sure he doesn't play, but I'll help him. And the Jets didn't really have that guy that was, they had developmental quarterbacks that I know Aaron worked with in health, but nobody that was like threatening to be the starter ever. But I do think he would embrace that if the team wanted to do that.
Interesting. Yeah, I think you'd embrace the teaching part, but I just wonder, like, if the rubber meets the road and it's, hey, we're sitting you down for this guy, that'd be another thing to kind of live through that and I guess deal with that. But coming to a new team, maybe the dynamic would be different. But all right, Brian, anything else you want to touch on before I get you out of here?
No, thanks for having me, and
enjoy
the wait.
Thanks. You want to tell people where they can follow you? If obviously if they want to keep up with Justin Fields and how things are going. The Jets.
NewYorkPost.com and on Twitter X at Brian Coz, BrianCoz. We'll see. And I think if Aaron Rodgers does sign with the Steelers, we're going to get Week 1 Monday Night Football, Steelers at Jets. That's my prediction.
They have the Packers on the schedule this year as well.
Oh, they do. Oh,
so and I'll leave you.
Where's that game?
Well, I was just going to say, I'll leave you with this little tidbit. There was a lot of rumblings that it was going to be Steelers Packers was going to be in Dublin, but I can't imagine they would want to bury the Rodgers return to facing his old team, his original team, at 9:30 a.m. like Week 4. So,
but that's a Steelers home game.
Yes.
Because Lambeau would be epic.
Oh, that would be nuts. But now the Steelers are the home team for the Packers and for Dublin this year. So I guess there's a lot of balls maybe in the air.
Yeah, I mean the Fields Steelers, like Brandon Echols versus the Jets. There's a lot of storylines there to be had.
Revenge game. Absolutely. All righty. Well, hey, thanks a lot, Brian. Really appreciate you taking some time for me here on this Tuesday morning, and enjoy the rest of the offseason. All right.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
All right. We'll see you. There goes Brian Costello from the New York Post, and thanks to you all for checking out another episode of Chip, Tam, and Football here on the PG Sports YouTube channel. Before we leave you, a quick message from Goldberg, Persky, and White. If you've been diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For more than 40 years, their firms represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. I hope everybody enjoyed some of the new decor behind me here on the show. If you're watching on YouTube, get the Michael Jordan Toon Squad action figure in honor of March Madness, I guess. Moron Mountain was kind of the site of one of the most epic basketball games of all time. I don't think there was any bracket that fed into it, but and then some nice artwork from the 5-year-old behind me here. So appreciate you joining. We'll be back with more shows the rest of the week. North Shore Drive, Paul Zeiss. Shout out to Andrew Destin, Pirates Pens beat writer, leaving the PG. I think he's going back out west. So we're going to miss him. Going to miss hearing him on this channel and elsewhere. But we will talk to you all again soon. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll see when we get any sort of resolution on the Steelers and the quarterbacks in 2025. Have a good one.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.